And then when they took him out into the burning heat and they whipped him, they lashed his back and his front, he would again say, Allah, Allah. And then when they would have a collar thrown, tied around his neck and drag him off into the places where as-sufaha, the low people, was set upon him, let loose upon him, in order to humiliate him, to spit upon him, to throw stones at him, to call him names, to call him a Ibn Sauda, something that he was called even after he became a Muslim. Oh, you son of a black woman, in order to somehow disparage his lineage. Still, he held on to the faith of his ultimate belief. Then they took him out into the burning sun again and tied him down. And it took about 7 people to carry this rock that they placed upon his chest, the chest of a lion, to crush him both physically, mentally and spiritually. And then on top of that rock they laid even more rocks to weight it down further. And then they asked him, who is your God? Now say, who is your God? And it was this time when he said, Ahadun Ahad. The man that was whipping and torturing him in this way didn't know what to do. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu came to buy him, to purchase him for something around, something close to 7 dinars. And after he purchased him and set him free, just to try to humiliate him even as he being freed, Umayyah, this enemy of Islam, said to Abu Bakr, you know, I would have sold him to you for just 1 dinar. And Abu Bakr responded to honor Bilal by saying, and I would have bought him for 100. That was his response. And when Bilal radiallahu anhu was freed and eventually the Muslims migrated to Mecca, Bilal, of course, as you know, became the first person to call the Adhan. And the Adhan isn't just something you call. To us, perhaps it is. You know, we're going to hear the Adhan tonight and we're going to associate that with time to breaking a fast. We're not going to associate it really with what Bilal radiallahu anhu used to associate it with. Because to him, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, those words were so powerful to him because he was with him. He saw him. He lived with him. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to say to him, Arahna biha ya Bilal. Oh Bilal, bring us tranquility, bring us peace with it. What was he talking about? The prayer. Arahna biha ya Bilal. Bring us peace and tranquility. We think of prayer time, we think, I'm busy and I'm going to quickly go and pray and then get the prayer out the way and then come along and carry on with my work. But the peace they sought was in prayer. Prayer was the time of peace. And that was the relationship Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had with Bilal. Bilal would be in the masjid. The masjid was right next to the house of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he'd be there all the time. His confidant, his treasurer, his personal bodyguard, his personal friend. And as time went on, the words Ahadun Ahad, unlike what people might think that the Muslims, when they fought in the battle of Badr, that they ran forth into battle and they shouted, Allahu Akbar. They didn't. Those weren't the words that were shouted on Badr. The words that were shouted in the battle of Badr, the battle cry of Badr was Ahadun Ahad. When the archers let loose their arrows, they shouted Ahadun Ahad. When the spears left the hands, Ahadun Ahad. When the swords were raised and smashed the shields, Ahadun Ahad. You know, historically speaking, each battle, famous battle, was given to a particular Sahabi. It was known as the day of so-and-so. The battle of Uhud was known as the day of Talha because he defended the Prophet ﷺ to the point at which his hand was cut and he was severed. And the day of the Khandaq, the trench, the battle of trench, was known as the day of Salman al-Farsi because he brought this Persian tactic of building a trench, digging a trench around Medina to protect the Muslims. But the most important day was the day of Fath Mecca, the conquest of Mecca, a city taken without bloodshed, without battle. لا تثريب عليكم اليوم. No vengeance upon you this day. وأنتم الطلقاء. You are free. These were the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam on this day. And this day was known as the day of Bilal. The conquest of Mecca. You all go to Mecca regularly, go to Umrah or Hajj. This was the day of Bilal. And it was the day of Bilal because this lowly Abyssinian Habashi slave who had been tortured and abused and humiliated, rose to the highest, both spiritually, metaphorically, and real ranks when he ascended the Kaaba. And from there he called for the first time, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And people were so shocked, even those who had converted to Islam. How is this black slave, they described him as a crow. How is this crow rising above to the top of this holy Kaaba? When Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam died and they asked him to call the Adhan after his death, he couldn't continue after Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. He couldn't even continue the word Muhammad. He couldn't say it anymore. And Bilal couldn't bear the pain of being so close to this. Every time he'd have to call that Adhan and remember that name, remember the days, the struggle, remember the worship, remember his love, the care, compassion that he had for his companions. He couldn't bear it anymore. So he asked Abu Bakr, please let me go off and go and fight jihad against the Romans, the Byzantines up in Sham. And there he went and he remained up until the day of the conquest of Jerusalem, another Muslim city, major city, that was captured and conquered without any bloodshed. Again, Mecca, now Jerusalem, and Medina, in fact, if you were to go back, all of these three cities. And there Bilal came and they asked him, they entreated upon him, please, Ya Bilal. Umar ibn Khattab asked him, for Allah's sake, let us hear your Adhan once more. And those Sahaba who remembered the Prophet ﷺ, like Khalid ibn al-Walid, like Muazzam ibn Jabal, like Abu Bakr bin Jarrah, the close companions, they remembered when Muhammad Rasulullah was said, they began to weep and cry. And so Bilal radiallahu anhu called the Adhan in Medina the first time ever. He called the Adhan in Mecca first time ever. And he called the Adhan in Al-Quds first time ever.